All right, guys, thank you for that. And we're here with our next guest. We've got Mark Solomon joining us to talk a pretty interesting concept about the potential futures of multi-story warehousing. Mark, thank you for being here with us. I love reading this story because it's something that I think is a pretty long runway future for the industry, right? We see it being successful in big cities. Talk to us about multi-story warehouses and how this idea has kind of come to be.
Well, multi-story warehouses, Kaylee, came to be in Asia and to a lesser extent in Europe because there's very little available land, and what is available is very expensive. So in markets like Hong Kong and Singapore, developers build vertically. In Hong Kong, you have a 22-story vertical warehouse. Europe, not as much, but clearly more advanced than the United States is. The model developed in the U.S. in 2018 when a facility in South Seattle, in an area called Georgetown Crossroads, was delivered. It was 3 stories, 590,000 square feet. The main occupier was a very large retailer who no one identified, but you can do process of elimination and determine who it is. And the view was, okay, we've got this expensive real estate. We need to be in an urban logistics setting. We can't build horizontally to match what's out in the suburbs and the exurbs because of the space. So let's go up. And the first multi-story vertical warehouse in the United States was born.
Mark, when I first saw this concept, I think it was about a year and a half ago when the first story came up about this idea, I had to jump back to like the ancient Egyptians, the question of how do you build the pyramids without getting very heavy pieces of equipment or pieces of cargo. In their case, of course, stones up such a high thing. Why hasn't this taken on so long? And obviously the design complexity of this thing have to be very specific in order for it to really catch on, correct?
Correct, Bill. You answered your own question. It's very costly. It's complicated. It takes different types of permitting, and it has to be designed to accommodate large trucks. The facilities in Asia handle smaller vehicles. The ones that are contemplated in the U.S. are designed to handle 53-foot trucks, and that requires clearances. It requires floor reinforcement. Excuse me. And it's a costly, time-consuming process. And it's gotten even more so in the wake of COVID and supply chain bottlenecks and the higher cost of money. It wasn't cheap 5 years ago. It's more expensive now to contemplate the model than it was back then.
Obviously, one of the big kind of constraints about warehouse expansion comes with land availability, land usage, and cost of land, right? When we think about warehouses and companies like Walmart or companies like Amazon who are locating their distribution centers in the middle of the country in Nebraska, Kansas, you've got lots of open and available land. But when you look at putting some of those in those urban-centric areas, New York City, Seattle, Atlanta, the land just simply isn't there. Is this more expensive or less expensive for these companies to think about building vertically than it is if they were to just change locations and then go out laterally in bigger tracts of land?
Kaylee, the imperative of being close to a growing number of urban consumers, and you can make the argument that more people are relocating to urban areas now than they had in the past. I think that trumps the existing model, which is to stick a warehouse 3 hours, not 3 hours, bad example, an hour and a half away and deliver from there. The people who doubt this model are the ones who say the existing model can easily handle quote unquote last mile deliveries. But there are companies who feel the pressing need to be extremely close to its customers. In part, it reduces transportation costs, reduces carbon footprint, improves the delivery experience. The model isn't for everybody, and even those who support it make that argument. You really need a critical mass of customers in an urban area who want that service in order to justify the cost of the model and the amount of time involved in building it and the specific needs that come with double or even triple decking a building.
Mark, do you think that the thoughts of these multi-story warehouses in these urban centers kind of go hand in hand with the thought of maybe alternate last mile delivery services? Like if you're talking like urban drone delivery, for example, obviously that's still a little bit far off, but urban drone delivery or services like Uber delivery, things like that, where you have this alternate mode that don't necessarily require large trucks, parcel carriers, what have you, but exist already, that infrastructure exists in the urban setting and can kind of go hand in hand maybe with a taller warehouse.
That is true, Kaylee. You don't need a UPS or FedEx or a traditional parcel carrier to execute a last mile delivery from an urban warehouse to a residence or to an apartment. Many of these, you talk about alternate delivery, many of these urban dwellings don't have mail rooms. So, and it's just an easier sell to tell somebody, okay, you can pick up your package at a alternate location near your apartment. I think you can lump this in with alternate deliveries. That's basically the long and the short of it.
So Mark, we got about 45 seconds left here. Obviously, this option is now presenting itself as a practical or maybe even an impractical option at this particular point, depending on how you look at it. Is it getting traction? And if so, do we look to see perhaps a small boom as the economy improves and as these opportunities become available?
Supporters believe there's a market for it, but they also believe that, as I said, it's not for everybody. Mm-hmm. It's being talked about even in markets like Atlanta and Dallas and Houston, which are not particularly land constrained. The markets where this works are New York, Chicago, Seattle, which are surrounded by bodies of water, which naturally constrain land development. My feeling is that it will work. I just wouldn't see it as a rule rather than the exception in terms of industrial development, Bill.
Certainly an interesting development in the warehousing space, and it's be interesting to see if things decide to go vertical, as you say. Mark, thanks so much for joining us.
You're welcome, guys. Have a good weekend.
You as well. All right, let's move back over to the wall and have another check with weather with Kaylee Nix.